heart of the Las Vegas Strip, inside a room filled with the deafening roar of flashing lights and cascading coins. A slot machine is supposed to be the ultimate temple of pure, unadulterated chance. Every single second, a hidden computer chip inside these machines generates billions of random mathematical possibilities, ensuring that the house always inevitably wins. It is a mathematical certainty designed by the world's most brilliant engineers to be completely unhackable. But in the winter of 2014, executives at the Lumiere Place Casino in St. Louis noticed something that defied the laws of physics and probability. A single unassuming man walked up to a row of Star Wars-themed slot machines, held his smartphone just a few inches from the screen, and began winning. Not just winning, but hitting jackpot after jackpot with terrifying surgical precision. He didn't use a crowbar, he didn't alter the machine's hardware, and he never even touched the internal wiring. He simply pressed the spin button at the exact fraction of a microsecond required to force the machine to bleed cash. By the time he walked out into the crisp night air, he had pocketed over $21,000 from a machine that was mathematically programmed to take his money. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. What the casino security team didn't know at that moment was that this single man was part of a shadow syndicate that had quietly cracked the code of global capitalism. They hadn't just figured out how to beat a single casino. They had turned the entire global gambling industry into their personal ATM. If you were in the shoes of those casino executives looking at the security footage, what would you have done? The man on the tape wasn't behaving like a typical ecstatic winner. He was calm, calculated, almost bored. His thumb hovered over the spin button, waiting for a hidden signal that no human eye could possibly perceive. Security teams immediately disassembled the slot machine down to its bare motherboards, searching for hidden transmitters, cheat code, or malicious software. They found absolutely nothing. The machine was perfectly calibrated, fully operational, and completely untampered with. It was a glaring contradiction that sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of gaming security, from Macau to Nevada. How do you stop a thief who isn't breaking any physical or digital laws? The investigation was handed over to elite corporate detectives and eventually caught the attention of the FBI as analysts began cross-referencing surveillance footage from across the United States. A disturbing pattern began to emerge. This wasn't an isolated incident. The exact same phantom phenomenon was happening in California, in Illinois, and down the glitzy corridors of Las Vegas. A rotation of different individuals, all carrying smartphones, all maintaining an eerie calmness, were walking away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. The losses were mounting into the millions, yet the mechanism of the crime remained a total black hole. But the real story is far more disturbing than anyone realized. To understand how this impossible a heist was orchestrated, investigators had to look beyond the borders of the United States, tracking a digital trail that led straight into the remnants of a closed Soviet military laboratory in St. Petersburg, Russia. Years earlier, the Russian government had made a sudden, sweeping decision to ban almost all forms of gambling nationwide. Overnight, thousands of casinos were forced to liquidate their assets, throwing thousands of highly sophisticated slot machines onto the black market for pennies on the dollar. Most people saw worthless junk, but a brilliant, fiercely resentful Russian mathematician named Alex saw a golden opportunity. Alex didn't just buy the machines, he reverse-engineered them. He brought them into a private facility and began analyzing the one component that governs every modern slot machine on Earth, the pseudo-random number generator, or PRNG. You see, a computer cannot truly understand the concept of randomness. To simulate chance, it uses a complex mathematical equation that starts with a specific number, known as a seed, and then applies a barrage of calculations to produce an unpredictable outcome. But Alex realized a fundamental truth of the digital age. If you know the exact mathematical formula being used, and you can figure out the initial seed, the randomness completely vanishes. The future becomes entirely predictable. It was a staggering breakthrough, but it presented a monumental obstacle. Even with the formula in hand, a human being cannot calculate billions of mathematical variations per second in their head while standing on a noisy casino floor. The sheer computing power required was immense. So how did Alex bridge the gap between a complex laboratory algorithm and a living, breathing casino? What happened next changed everything. Alex built a highly sophisticated system that weaponized the one device everyone carries in their pocket, a smartphone. He recruited a network of low-profile operatives, known as couriers and flew them out to international destinations with a very specific set of instructions. A courier would walk up to a targeted slot machine and record a few minutes of video gameplay. As the reels spun, the phone's camera captured the subtle patterns, the exact timing of the wins and losses, and the subtle rhythms of the machine's internal clock. That raw video data was then instantly transmitted across the globe to a secure server in St. Petersburg. There, Alex's custom-designed software analyzed the footage, cracked the machine's current position in its mathematical cycle, and calculated the exact millisecond the courier needed to press the spin button to hit a massive payout. But the genius of the scam lay in the final execution. The server would send a signal back to the courier's phone, causing it to vibrate precisely 1/4 of a second before the perfect mathematical window arrived. When the phone vibrated, the courier pressed the button. The human nervous system took care of the rest. It was a flawless synergy of human flesh and digital manipulation. The house didn't stand a chance. As millions of dollars vanished from casino vaults, the gaming industry fell into a state of absolute panic. The scale of the threat was existential. If the public realized that slot machines could be systematically drained, the entire multi-billion-dollar psychological illusion of gambling would collapse. But just as Alex's syndicate seemed entirely unstoppable, they hit an unexpected snag. Casino security teams, now acutely aware of the smartphone technique, began deploying advanced facial recognition software and monitoring the behavior of players. With microscopic scrutiny, the hunters were now being hunted. In late 2014, a courier named Murat Blaya was spotted acting suspiciously at a casino in Missouri. The moment his phone vibrated, security personnel closed in. The FBI finally had their hands on a physical operative, a live phone, and the key to the entire operation. But this revelation only exposed a much bigger problem. Federal prosecutors quickly realized they were facing a legal nightmare under existing United States law. Wire fraud and hacking statutes generally require a suspect to physically alter a machine or breach a secure computer network. But Murat hadn't broken into anything. He hadn't altered a single line of code inside the casino. He had simply looked at a publicly displayed screen, used a phone to analyze public data, and pressed a button that the casino invited him to press. Was this actually illegal, or had a mathematical genius simply found a legitimate loophole in the fabric of modern commerce? The legal battle that followed sent shockwaves through the justice system, forcing investigators to re-examine what it truly means to steal in a world governed by algorithms. While federal agents scrambled to build an unprecedented legal case, the pressure inside Alex's organization began to fracture the syndicate from within. Money was flowing in faster than it could be laundered, and the constant fear of international arrest warrants began to take a psychological toll. The couriers were facing decades in American federal prisons, while Alex sat safely behind the geopolitical shield of St. Petersburg, pocketing the vast majority of the profits. And that's exactly when things took a dark turn. The FBI managed to flip one of the arrested couriers, turning a loyal soldier into a devastating whistleblower. The entire structure of the Russian syndicate was laid bare, exposing bank accounts, hidden servers, and the true, staggering scope of the operation. They had compromised thousands of machines across 5 continents. Yet the ultimate climax of this global chess match did not happen in a courtroom or a dark alley. It happened in the digital ether. Realizing his network was compromised, Alex did something completely unprecedented. He reached out directly to the world's leading slot machine manufacturers. He offered them a choice: pay him a multi-million-dollar ransom, or he would publish the mathematical vulnerabilities of their machines online, destroying their global businesses overnight. The manufacturers refused to negotiate with a digital terrorist, choosing instead to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to physically recall and replace the internal microchips of hundreds of thousands of machines worldwide. The immediate consequence of this silent war was a total overhaul of global gaming technology, a massive hidden expense that was quietly passed down to everyday consumers through tighter odds and lower payouts. Murat and several other couriers were ultimately convicted and sentenced to federal prison, serving as a stark warning to anyone attempting to replicate the scam. But the mastermind, Alex, remains completely out of reach. A ghost in the machine, living a life of luxury somewhere in Russia, his brilliant mind still holding the keys to secrets we have yet to discover. The next time you walk past a flashing slot machine and hear the seductive chime of a potential jackpot, you have to ask yourself the chilling question: are you truly playing a game of chance, or are you just sitting at a machine whose code has already been bought, sold, and broken by someone you will never see?